Look at that. We've already got one thumbs up already. Was that you or was that somebody else?
Not me.
It wasn't you. Okay. Do you play an instrument, Andy?
I do. I play. I used to play penny whistle. I play ukulele, and I've been using this time shut away to work on guitar.
Oh, you have?
So yeah,
Before we officially start, do you want to run and get your ukulele and maybe play a little bit or not?
no, I'm not. I'm not that. My hands start to shake and sweat, and it's awful. I'm not there yet.
Okay. All right, let's go officially live because we've got 3 people watching now. Hey, everybody, it's Friday with Friends, and this is Simon Brooks with my good friend,
Andy
Andy
Davis.
Davis. Yay!
Hi, Simon.
Hey, Andy, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and it's so great to be here with you. Although I would love to be right there with you in your man cave, but another
In me
time.
garage?
Mhm.
Yeah, that would be good. We'd be supping on a couple of beers, not worrying about the world or anything like that. That would be much better. Oh, that's what you've got? No, I'm drinking water. I thought,
I have three. Now, ordinarily, if I was performing before, in public, I never have more than two beverages. Usually I manage water and coffee, but since I'm at home, I never know what's going to call to me. So I have water and coffee and beer on the stool next to
oh, there you go. I think that's a good idea. That's a very good idea. So, howdy again from Virginia, from Via Good. We're not going to do this all the way through the show, but, there's just us here right now. And Jane Dorfman,
Hi,
she's actually.
Jane.
Do you
Thanks
know?
for coming.
Do you know Jane?
No, we just met. No,
Okay.
I've seen her name go across your screen. I
Yeah.
uh, I popped in on your visit with Robin and
Yeah.
also with Papa Joe, but I was
Ah,
with you and Donna all the way through this morning. And since you went particularly long, I was doing my dishes and I even got my stove cleaned
wow.
because your conversation was so great and I was pretty much smiling all the way through. You're
That's
you're
good.
so good at this.
I don't
You're
know
kind
about
of
that.
like an
Thank you.
impish Terry Gross.
Impish, definitely. Terry Gross, I'm not sure. We'll see. So Jane and I, we actually met last year. We went down to the Stone Soup Storytelling Festival,
Uh-huh.
and the way that they work it is that you take yourself there on your own dollar if you're invited to do the new voices. So you pay for yourself to get there, you pay for accommodation, all that kind of stuff, and you perform a 10-minute story, spend the weekend there, and then you go home. And if they like you enough, then they'll have you back the next year. And so Jane and I were one of or two of 12 people, and most of us were staying in this one Airbnb. I mean, we all had separate rooms for the majority of us. We all had separate rooms. I was actually sharing with Paul Strickland, which was an absolute hoot and a holler. And Jane and I, we got on like a house on fire. It was great. So yeah, that's how we met, and we've stayed in touch since. And it was such a good group of people. It really was. It was a lot of fun. So what have you been up to? Keeping yourself sane?
Well, I mean, mostly what I do is sit around and pull ticks off our dog. I mean, it seems like
Yeah.
it's going to be the sort of year that that's going to be nearly a full-time job. But any extra time I have, I go down and water the peas and think about planting more greens. And then anytime beyond that, I actually attend to my day job and as co-director of this camp that's not opening this summer. So we're
It's not opening at all.
figured we're not right now. We figured it would be prudent and responsible not to bring people together. So we're doing some extraordinary fundraising and trying to get all the little projects done that we never managed to get done in the flurry of opening each year. So, for example, right now we're doing a major renovation on one of our bunkhouses. So I have a very nice balance between white collar work and blue collar work every day.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, because normally you would have hired your team by now and be getting ready to rock
Oh
and
yeah,
roll, wouldn't
this
you?
would be right now. I would be serving dinner for my Memorial Day work weekend crew.
Right.
And it's very sad that that's not happening. It's always a raucous and productive time, and so we're working on getting a few people who are so dedicated that they want to come even when they can't hug us. So
That's good.
people who are willing to work even without hugs will get up here for day trips and things. People who live a little bit closer.
Well, that's cool. That's good.
But
No,
yeah,
that's a great.
this
So
is
what,
an
what's
unusual year.
what's the name of your center? Tell everyone.
The World Fellowship Center in Albany, New Hampshire.
There
We're
you
a
go. The
peace and
world
justice oriented camp and retreat center that's been here since 1941.
1941. It's been there since. And the woodworking
And the
is
only
amazing.
other summer that was at all like this one was a couple of the early summers during World War II. They became a youth hostel and were only open to people who got here under their own steam. But they didn't try to do a full-fledged summer program those years.
Wow, that's cool. That's very cool. Yeah, I've been there a few times. When I came up to interview Milbury, and a couple of times when you've had the New England storytelling
Yeah,
company picnic.
the company picnic, right?
Yeah, it's a nice place. It's a very peaceful place. I like it a lot. So you're telling me you're reading an X-rated book right now,
Well, so here's the thing:
plague driven.
our local libraries have been doing their best to keep us all in mind food, even if we had to do curbside pickup and all that sort of thing. But I've mostly taken the opportunity to go back to old favorites or books that I never quite made it through the first or the second time.
Like The
So
Hobbit.
I've been spending time with the Kalevala, the Finnish national epic, and with Boccaccio. And it shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. A lot of people have been thinking that there was a certain parallelness, although more drastic situation going on in the 14th century. When Boccaccio wrote the Decameron or published the Decameron only 2 years after the worst plague year. And
Wow.
it's really interesting because I guess you could qualify it as escapist fiction because the frame story, of course, deals with these 10 young people who decide, seven women and three men, who decide to escape from Florence and ride out the plague in a beautiful place, telling stories to each other, 10 stories, each telling a story a day for 10 days. But the actual content of the stories has virtually nothing to do with the plague or that kind of really drastic, difficult issue.
But
But of
but they
course, it
hint
has
at the
a lot
relationships
to
between the people there, don't they?
do. Beg pardon?
They hint at the relationships that are almost not quite sometimes forming between the 10 people.
I do think there's a certain amount of flirtation going on,
I think so too.
but what I love about it is although it doesn't really get into um, the really dire things that were happening, it hints at the reasons for dire things happening between humans. There's a lot about Boccaccio loves to take down a good hypocrite, and
Yeah.
he to a certain degree skewers injustice, and likes a good racy tale.
Yes, he
And
does.
yeah, so there's I mean, he has a very, we could say, modern sense of humor.
He does. Although to call it modern, I don't think. I don't think that's necessarily true. I mean, you look at some people think that the Canterbury Tales is like a riff on the Decameron. And
Well, yeah, it was the Decameron was very good source material for Chaucer.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean those guys back in those days, from Shakespeare on down,
yeah,
were very good borrowers. They
yes, they did
yeah,
borrow a lot.
they all had boundary issues, and I say that with the utmost respect.
Yeah, but the stories that they told were really good stories. And then some that I haven't read much of the Decameron, um, but the stories are really really good. There's a couple of stories that I've thought about telling, um, but it's like you got to find the right audience for some of these stories. And
Exactly. You tend to have shorter audiences of shorter stature, and the way our society is arranged right now, people frown on those stories being told to
mhm.
those elementary school audiences.
Well, no, yeah, the stories I'm thinking of, I would never tell to those people. The stories that I'm thinking of telling, this would be like a grown-up audience that I'd be telling to.
Right.
But even then, it's like, it's that they're funny stories, and that you have to find the right way to tell them today without them being misconstrued, or not misconstrued is probably not the right word, without people taking offense to them. There's that. It's a very narrow line. It's a very thin line to actually tell the story and have it be a really good ribald story, or just telling a naughty story and being offensive. Do you know what I mean? To this
Right.
modern audience.
And also, those of us who tend to be fairly physical storytellers, when
Hmm.
you're telling that sort of a story, you have to be very careful about how physical and what kind of physicality you exhibit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would say that's a true statement. Ah, dear. No, I do like some of those old stories. Like that so the ca- go on, you pronounce the Kavalav. It's not that. What is it?
Kalevala.
Kalevala. So this is a Finnish epic.
Right. So it was strung together runes or spoken poems
Really?
that were ancient, that were at least as old as Beowulf, that had to do there were all kinds of origin stories and hero tales and that sort of thing. But they were told by a vast array of rune singers or tellers in a lot of different places. And of course, they all had very different repertoires and they all had sort of pieces of the tales. So in the middle 1800s, early to middle 1800s, this physician and scientist and man of letters named Elias Lönnrot went on a series of field trips in certain parts of Finland and bordering areas, Estonia and so forth, and collected the runes, as they were called, and then tried to put them into a logical order.
So that sounds
And
like
so,
Gilgamesh.
it could be like that. I mean, he definitely had the idea that he was taking something that was obscure and only known very locally and elevating it into a Finnish national epic, which would unify his people and also have linguistic benefits in terms of bringing the country together linguistically and so forth. And he took a couple of passes at it. The first time, he and others weren't exactly happy with the order as it came out. So that existed for a few years, and then he took another pass at it and reordered it and made it longer. And so when scholars talk about the Kalevala, they have to always specify whether they're talking about the old Kalevala or the new Kalevala. And the new Kalevala isn't so new anymore.
Right. Well, yeah, it's like the Edda, right? Probably time-wise.
Mm.
No, because you said that he collected them in the 1800s, but that was when he
Yeah,
collected them.
so it was around. I'm a little fuzzy on my dates, fuzzy in other ways, but it was around 1850, I think, that he came up with the final order and the final version.
Right. It amazes me that people, have taken fragments to create a story that makes sense. Like Gilgamesh, they're on the clay tablets. The clay tablets are broken into like thousands of pieces, and then they had to put them together, and then they had to figure out what order they were all in. And then in
And
2015,
you tell Gilgamesh, don't you?
yeah, I do, yeah, yeah. And then in 2015, they found, after the Taliban ransacked a lot of the museums, there was an amnesty on people bringing stuff back. Because people said, if there's stuff that you shouldn't have that should be in the museum, bring it back, and no questions asked. And this tablet reappeared that no one had seen before. And so in 2015, they had this tablet that altered the order of the story because it like added this piece, and it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense if the story's this way, but it makes sense if the story's that way. And so that all these translations that we have of Gilgamesh are now wrong because they found this missing piece. And I wonder if they were to do, if some of these runes were maybe found again that had never been found before, if that would bugger up the.
Except I believe that they were entirely of the oral tradition. I
Oh,
think
okay.
I think before Lonrot, there were a couple other folklorists who took a pass at writing down some of them, but there was never an effort made up until him to actually unify them. So unfortunately, since I believe all the last of the rune tellers were kind of born in my grandparents' generation, the late 1800s, and
So they were.
lived to there were somewhere 3 or 5 rune tellers who lived into the middle 1900s.
So there were people still reading the runes back then, as late as
Telling
that.
them,
Oh, telling them.
yes, because they were entirely oral.
Okay.
They didn't even have priests like in Ireland who wrote down some of the stories.
Right,
It
but
was
they.
entirely, completely a creature of the oral tradition.
Wow. Yeah, because those priests in Ireland, they saved a lot of stuff, and
Yeah,
they.
Bowdlerized it to a degree, I think.
Well,
Also,
they
yeah.
some of it they did, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, if you look at the stuff that they were recording, the religious scripts that they were recording, I mean, the whole Catholic faith would have fallen apart if it hadn't have been for those monks in the islands of Ireland. Yeah. So John Nelson was saying that the captioning is rendering the Kalevala differently every time Andy says the name. Maybe if we say it's the Kale Valley, it'll come out right. Do you want to share a story with us, Andy?
Oh, sure. Why not? So I had been thinking about what I'd tell, and the wonderful Donna Laird had requested a while back when I was doing a story, this particular story, and I didn't humor her, which made me very sad.
Made her sad too, right?
Yes. So I said I would tonight, and I think it fits in with what we're talking about because, of course, we're talking about storytelling, and to a certain degree, we're talking about stories saving lives,
Yeah.
and I think this story is all about that.
All right. Take it
So
away.
I usually introduce it by saying, the story I have for you has formulaic beginning, a gruesome middle, and a disappointing ending. I hope you like it. In days of yore and times long gone before, far in the east there lived a king of kings by the name of Shahryar. Now Shahryar had but one wife, whom he loved after a fashion, and he thought she loved him too. But over time, he put more energy into the acquisition of more wealth and power than he did into the cultivation of his relationship. So the time came when he was to depart on yet another foreign mission, and the caravan of camels was waiting outside when he realized that he had forgotten something within. So he turned around and went back through the arched passageway to his bedchamber, and he burst in the door and found his wife in the arms of another man. She was holding him the way the wind holds up the bird in flight. She was embracing him the way the buttonhole embraces the button. Well, King Shahryar flew into a towering rage and unsheathed his scimitar, something you should never do when you're in a towering rage. And in 2 blinks of an eye, he had lopped off both their heads. And as the heads rolled to a stop on the polished marble floor, and as he summoned his eunuchs to come clean up the mess, he contemplated what he had lost. And he realized that he would never trust a woman again as long as he lived. And this is when he came up with the most diabolical scheme ever arrived at in literature or pre-literature. He would marry a maiden each evening, make her truly his wife that night, and then send her off with the hooded executioner the following day. And what's worse, he carried out this scheme for 3 long years, such that any family that had daughters and half a lick of sense fled into exile, making it very hard indeed to find marriageable maidens. And the king's chief advisor, the wazir, who also carried the portfolio minister of maidenly procurement, began to feel a premonitory prickle on his own neck. Now it seemed that he himself had 2 daughters of his own, who so far had been given a pass, sort of an amnesty, by the king. The younger was named Dunyazad, and the elder was Scheherazade. Oh, Scheherazade. She was as beautiful as the moon on the 14th night of Ramadan, and she was as cultured as she was beautiful. She had studied the poetry of all the languages of the land and had memorized great long passages of it, which she could recite at the drop of a hat. So people were always following her around with hats, dropping them to see her do it. She had sat at the feet of the finest storytellers in the land and absorbed their lore. She had studied mathematics and all the sciences. She could look up into the jeweled vault of the night sky and unlock its mysteries. She was kind and courteous, wise and witty, well-read and well-bred. So she went to her father one day and said, "Father, how long must this senseless slaughter of women continue?" And her father, who was helpless in his own complicity, had no good answer for her. That's Darby the Beagle welcoming Fiona home. The joys of the home studio. So she returned to her father a few days later and said, "Father, I would have you marry me to that king." And this is when the wazir responded with words, according to the Richard F. Burton translation of the 1001 Nights, that could certainly come in handy to any of you who ever has to deal with a recalcitrant teenager or post-teenager or anyone who's going to do something silly and get themselves into trouble. So pay close attention. He said, "O scanty of wit, expose not thy life to this peril." Now, as I'm telling you, Simon, this will come in handy for you. I
It will.
guarantee it, probably this very evening. So please repeat after me. "O scanty of wit, expose not thy life to this peril."
O scanty of wit, do not expose yourself to this peril.
More or less. Very good. Then he said, "Leave me not bereft by thy loss," which in modern English more or less means, "I'll really miss you if you get your head chopped off." But he saw the look in her eye, and he knew she was determined, and he knew he had prepared her to be ready and able to take care of herself. So reluctantly, he gave her his blessing. And she did indeed marry that king. And after they had been married, but before they went into the royal bedchamber, she called her sister to her and said, "Dunyazad, when we have been in the royal bedchamber a while, and then a while longer, knock at the door and ask me to tell you a tale to while away the hours of our last night together. And I shall tell thee a tale that shall be our deliverance, inshallah." So Dunyazad did as her sister said. And the king was lying awake, unable to sleep. And so he bade her enter, and Scheherazade began to tell. And she told a story that lasted all through the dark hours of the night, all the way until the first rays of sunlight of the morning lit up the golden threads on the tapestry hanging on the bedchamber wall. And there she suspended the story. And Shahryar granted her another day of life that she might finish the story the following night, which she did. But she began another, and the following morning she left the second story perched atop another cliff. And that's the way it went for 1001 nights. Scheherazade created for as long as the king had killed. She told stories of wit and wisdom and wonder and adventure, time and time again, bringing him out of the narrow confines of his own tormented brain into a broader world. And at the end of this time, she came before him with the 3 children to whom she had given birth during this time. They weren't just telling stories. One walking, one crawling, and one at her breast. And she asked him to release her from the pain of death for the sake of the 3 children they had together. And he said, "Oh, Scheherazade, I had already long ago forgiven thee. Get it? He said he had forgiven her.
Yeah.
And then now we come to the disappointing conclusion of the story I promised you. You see, she stayed with the guy. They got married again, this time for real, with 7 days of festivities, all manner of food and drink, and storytellers and musicians and mimes and mountebanks, whatever they are, performing, all to distract us from the fact that she stayed with the guy. And the only way I can make peace with this ending is to realize that through those 1,001 nights of storytelling, time and time again, she had cast such a spell on his right brain and heart that she had transformed him, transmogrified him into another person entirely, or at least another character. Such is the potential power and hope of storytelling. Long live Scheherazade. Alhamdulillah.
That was absolutely brilliant.
You're all the audience I need, Simon. You and all those other nice people who are there on Facebook Live.
All 11 of them. Woohoo!
Mhm.
So a mountebank is a person who deceives others, especially in order to trick them out of their money, aka a charlatan. So there you go. Your
Was
word
that
choice.
John Nelson filling us in on that?
No, that was. Oh no, that was me reading off my
Oh,
off my phone. It's just looking it up because it's like I know I've looked it up before and I couldn't. I couldn't. So we've got some nice comments here. We got Francis Lake saying that the arts are especially important in our lives right now, and then Jane, who also tells the Arabian Nights.
oh, cool.
Bravo, love that. Yes, I agree with Via. Transformative storytelling. Indeed, Phyllis. Tony's there. Yay, Tony, I thought you had something else going on. So your word choices in this, Andy, were phenomenal.
Oh, thank you.
Your descriptions were absolutely brilliant. So you came up with all of those things, right? That was your magic that you pulled out of the air for those descriptions.
Well, mostly. I mean, so I did indeed. I one of my treasured objects is a 3-volume set of the Richard F. Burton translation of the 1,001 Nights, and so I remember reading the frame story and saying, now, how the heck would you tell this to kids, even middle schoolers? Because you might recall, and Jane certainly recalls, it's extremely gruesome and extremely racist, especially by our conception, and it involves a lot more people than just. So it was a matter of stripping it down and then treasuring some of Richard F. Burton's word choices, and then coming up with some of my own. Because also his language, he prided himself on. He claimed to be exact, translating exactly, but
Right.
it also meant that he's a little stilted, and the way he uses the language is a little archaic at times.
Yeah, the way that you described Scheherazade, not Scheherazade, his first wife was holding her lover like the wind underneath a bird's wings. That was just phenomenal. And then Joanne Piazzi, good friend of ours. Hey, Joanne. She says, holding him as tight as a buttonhole holds a button. Yeah. I'm like, those were the
I
things that popped for me. I mean, that was just
I
like, oh my
I
God, that's so gorgeous.
I love to tell this to middle schoolers, and it's really fun to see them. Like you see the wheels turn,
Yeah.
and and then they start poking each other after that line.
Yeah. John liked that. Yeah. The heads rolling off onto the marble floors. Yeah. I was envisioning lots of blood as well there, John, just like pooling out. Ah. And the asides for the listeners. This is, yeah, I agree. You have to have asides. Absolutely. Even if they're Fiona walking up the stairs. So for those people who are watching who don't know Andy Davis, he's renowned for his shaggy dog stories, and for some of your incredibly moving and funny personal stories, which also climb the line over into the political field as well, which is great. I like that a lot. Um, but when I hear you tell stuff like this, which I don't hear you tell very often, it just blows me away because your word choices are so freaking good. They just really, really good. Oh, hang on.
Thank you so much.
Oh, so Jane's mentioning about the Hadaway version. I actually have that. I have both of those books. Um, well, Jane, you go look after your pizza because that's important. Husbands and pizzas are important.
Thanks for
Um,
coming, Jane.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, have you read the Hadaway version? So this guy, he's an Arab, and his grandmother used to tell him the stories, and so
Mhm,
he felt that some of the culture had been taken away from the stories,
mhm,
and so he wanted to put that back, and so he did. He's got two volumes. One of them has Aladdin and Sinbad, and Aladdin wasn't in the original version anyway because that's a Chinese story.
mhm, mhm.
Um, um, and the other book has some of the, I wouldn't say the lesser known stories. I mean, they're really good. They're really, really good. It's not a light read, but I doubt that Burton is either.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I fondled it on bookstore shelves back when we used to do that sort of thing.
Right. I'll let you borrow my copies. I'll spray them with
Thanks.
disinfectant beforehand because I got both of them. So yeah,
Before
they're
and
there.
after. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yeah. That's your word choice is delicious. Just to me, they're like phenomenal. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. What else should we talk about? I could tell you a
Well,
story.
I would love to hear a story, Simon. So would the gathered faithful out there in virtual land.
There are now 10 people that are out there. Now Jane's gone. We've lost one. So I was, as you were telling the story of Shahrazad, this Irish story popped in my mind, and you know this story. You've heard me tell this story before, and I don't know where I knew this story from. It's been one that's been in my head for a long time. Not sure where I heard it originally, but I did hear a version of it told. Oh, no, I can't think of his name. It was this Irish actor who did a TV show, and it was Irish. It was folk tales. He would tell folk tales in this pub, and there were people that would play music and dance around. And I heard him tell a version of this story. And he calls it the Tea Man. Eamon, what's his name? Eamon Kelly. There you go.
Eamon Kelly, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So and his version is slightly different to mine, but it's the same story. It's just it's a variant. Because mine's not about a tea man. It's about a farmer and his wife, or a farmer and her husband. Either way, it doesn't matter. Now this farmer lived on his own at his farm. It was a large freehold farm, a large freehold small farm, and he was able to look after it. But when he got to about my age, he's getting to his 50s, and he thought, this is going to get harder as I get older. I should probably get married and have kids, and then they can help work. And there was this young woman in the town who he particularly liked, took a great fancy to, in fact, and she seemed to take a fancy back. Because she was the youngest of 6 or 7 kids, he went to the father and asked the father if it was okay if they married, despite the huge age difference. And the father was like, yeah, it's one less mouth for me to feed. Sure, you can marry her. And she was happy because she liked the man a lot. And they got married. And when they got married, their relationship was very, very physical, very, very active, kind of like, you know, the brother, actually. It was the brother who was having the affair with the king's first wife. Do you know that?
Um, no, I don't know that. We'll talk.
Okay. All right, then we'll talk. And so it was a very passionate relationship that they had. And they worked the farm and they got on really well and everything was great. But as the years passed and the years passed and the years passed, she found that she was starting to do more and more of the work. And the passion that they had when they first got married, well, let's put it this way. He was spending a lot more time with his pillow than with her at night. And she became frustrated with this. And people who have gone through this kind of situation in their marriage, you know, sometimes it goes like this, right? And when those dry periods, it's like a piano wire being stretched and stretched and stretched and stretched, and it gets tighter and tighter and tighter, and your whole body is like, and that's how it was. And then every once in a while, that vibration, that wire was loosened, and the years passed and the years passed, and more work was taken on by the younger of the two in this relationship. And she looked around at the farm, and it was getting really rough looking. There was like tiles that needed to be put up on the roof. There was a lot of stuff that needed to be done before the winter set in. And so she said to her husband, "Now, my dear," and this isn't an Irish accent, "My dear, I want you to go to the market on hiring day and find someone to come and work with us. Now, not one of your old friends, mind. I don't want you and a friend of yours just sitting around chatting while I do even more work because you two are gabbing away. Find someone strong. Find someone who can actually help us do our work." So her husband said, "All right." And so market day came round when it was hiring day, and he got on the old nag, the horse, not his wife. He got on the horse and he rode it to the market. And she was looking out of the kitchen window when she saw her husband come into the courtyard of the farm. And she could see her husband on the front of the horse, and she could see that there was somebody behind him. But she didn't see who it was until the horse pulled around and he tied it up outside the farmhouse and let the young man get off the horse. This young man obviously came from a poor family because his clothes were at least 2 sizes too small. His shirt sleeves ended halfway up his arm. His pant legs, well, it looked like there was flooding about to happen. And when the young man climbed off the horse, she was amazed that the trousers didn't burst open at the seams. They seemed so tight. And when he turned round and came into the house and she went out to meet him, his shirt, well, she could almost see every single muscle on his body. And he took his cap off and said hello, and he was introduced to the wife, and they said that he'd sleep out in the barn while the summer was still ending. And that's how things went. But that piano wire of hers, it got tighter and tighter because she would watch this young man chopping wood and sweating with his shirt off, and those muscles, and that young virile man who slept in the barn while she slept with her husband, and that piano wire is getting tighter and tighter and tighter. It was awful. She couldn't stand it. And her husband, he was trying to keep up with the young guy, so he was spending even more time with a pillow than with her now. He was exhausted because he was trying to show his strength and be a manly man. Well, winter came on really early, and the young guy, he couldn't sleep in the barn. It was too cold, and they hadn't cut enough wood to allow for 2 fires in the house. "Well, why do we need 2 fires?" said the woman. And her husband said, "Well, we have a fire going upstairs in our bedroom, and then if the help comes and lives in the house, he'll be sleeping in the kitchen on the bench, and we haven't got enough wood for the 2 fires. He'll be just as cold in the kitchen if the fire's not running and we haven't got enough wood." "Well, what are we going to do?" she said. "Well, I've been thinking about this, And I've got an idea. It's not a very good one though, but it's the only thing I can come up with. And maybe if you have another idea, I'd be happy to hear it. Well, what idea is it that you have? Well, so I was thinking, at least temporarily, because maybe we can get out and get some more wood, and then this won't be a problem. But in the meantime, what will happen is well, if you're okay with this, and if he's okay with this, is that he can you can get your dressing gown on, your night dress and everything, and then he would climb into our bed, face up against the wall, and then you would get into the bed and sleep in the middle, and I'd be on the outside of the bed in case the fire goes out, so I can keep it going. He's going to share our bed? Well, maybe I could put up with it for a while, she said. Maybe I could put up with it. Oh, you're such a good woman. You're such a fabulous lass. I do love you so much. And I love you too, she said. And so the young man, the help, started to sleep in that bed in the middle between the bride and the groom. And every once in a while she would roll over and find herself pressed up against the hot back of the young man, who was fast asleep, of course. And that piano wire inside her got stronger and tighter and longer, and it was driving her bonkers. Well, the young man, he'd been talking about his mother's food at home and how he was missing it, and how he especially missed these pies that she made. And there were some apples left over from the end of the season, so she decided to make an apple pie. And she baked it, and she brought it out after supper that night. And she said, "Oh, I've got this nice pie for everyone." And she cut a slice for her husband and handed it to him. Then she cut a slice slightly bigger for the help and handed it to him. And then she cut a smaller slice for herself and took that. And she watched as a young man ate this pie as only a young man can. Right, Tony? Gobbling it down, cutting it up into small pieces and shoving it in his mouth. And she looked at him and says, Is the crust, is it firm enough? She said, "Oh, yeah, it's nice and firm," says the young man. He's shoveling it into his mouth. "And is the filling, is it moist enough?" She said, "Oh, yeah, it's really moist. It's absolutely perfect. It's like, it's almost, I would say it's better than my mother's." And he finished off the pie. "Can I have another slice?" And the farmer, the husband, he said, No. We'll put the rest of the pie away and we'll have that for breakfast." And so the young man said, All right. And so she wrapped it up in a linen cloth and put it in the pantry for breakfast the next day. And then they all went to bed. She put her night clothes on, and then the young man climbed into the bed, and she went in the middle, and the husband, he went on the outside of the bed. And that night, she just lay there between these two men, fast asleep. The young man because he'd been working hard, the old man because he'd also been working hard. And she just looked at the ceiling, wondering what she could do, wondering if she could survive this. And then she heard a cow, a young calf, lowing out in the field. And so she went to turn and wake up the help, but then she thought, no. And she turns and she woke up her husband. And she says, "Husband, one of the cows has got out, one of the calves has got out, and it's in the field, in the snow. Why don't you wake up the help and have him do it?" "Well, but then he would have to climb over me, or I'd have to get out of bed, and I'm so snuggly buggly warm. I certainly don't want him climbing over me. And I don't want to get out of bed because it's nice and toasty where I am right now. Couldn't you get the young calf?" "Well, I suppose so, my dear," he said. And he climbed out of bed, took his jacket off the peg on the back of the door, put it on, and she listened to him as he made his way downstairs. And she listened to him as he put his boots on. And she listened to him as the door opened and then closed. And then she turned around and shook the help away. What's up? "Well, there's a cow, a young cow, a calf. It's escaped. It's in the lower field. My husband's gone to get it." "Well, I should go and get it. I'm the help here." No. It's all right. And she looked at him with a little twinkle in her eye and she said, "Would you like some?" And he's like, "What?" "Well, she pulled the covers down a little bit. "Would you like some?" He's like, "What about your husband?" "Oh, he's an old man now, and he's going to get the cow. He's got to walk through the snow. He's got to tie the calf up, and then he's got to drag it back to the barn. That's not going to take him a short amount of time. He'll be gone for a while. We got plenty of time. Are you sure we got enough time? And are you sure about this?" "Oh, I am so sure," she said. And she lay on her back, and the young man climbed on top of her, and then he climbed over her, and he climbed out of the bench. She said, "Where are you going?" "Well, to get a slice of that pie. Would you like a slice?" The end. Tra la la.
A good story well told.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Tony liked it. That story was right up Tony's street. I do love to eat a hot slice of pie right out of the oven. Yes. I think that goes for all
Easy,
three of us.
Tony. Easy, Tony.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to share, Andy? You got any gigs coming up, either virtual or anything like that? Or is most of your work now just looking after the World Fellowship Center?
Well, I should tell you, yeah, we are working on our online programming for World Fellowship for the summer. We've already had our first pandemic stay-at-home companion. We had that
Instead of
last
the Prairie
Saturday, I
Home
guess.
Companion?
It kind of a variety show with a little political and cultural content. A certain amount of songs were sung, points were made. And so we have our next coming up on Saturday, June 13th. And so I and Corey Dolgan, the folk singing sociologist, are co-hosting. And then we usually have 3 guests. So we'll do that probably a number of times over the course of the season.
Okay.
And then we'll do 2 educational programs a week. Fun Night, which is our Friday open mic. And then I'll be doing morning announcements each morning, which ordinarily happen in the dining hall at 8:30. But I'll be releasing on the World Fellowship Facebook page at 8:30 so that people can enjoy them whenever they need them over the course of the day. I usually cover the weather. The weather here won't be super useful to people, but we might mix it up and occasionally tell people the weather in other places. And
like Tibet.
what's going on, upcoming events, and then I do a little this day in history and a quotation for the day.
Wow.
So you can find that all summer long on the World Fellowship page, but
So
that'll keep me busy.
What's the URL for that? And I'll type it up here.
Well, I
Or
don't
should I
have
put it
it
up
offhand,
later?
but it's just the World Fellowship Center Facebook page.
Okay, World Fellowship. Oops. Center Facebook page. All right. For Andy's variety show.
And beyond that, we're hoping to get started on our house this summer, building in the neighboring town of Tamworth. Yeah, so yeah, in terms of a lot of externally focused storytelling work, I think that will shrivel up a little bit for at least a few months.
Right. So are you actually building a house or are you renovating one?
So it's we're building on raw land. So we're getting somebody to do the foundation, and then I'll do most of the carpentry. Fiona, our daughter, is delighted to help and learn some things along the way. So we're looking forward to working together in July and August, depending what happens with how full-time I am with the World Fellowship and that sort of thing. We're still figuring out how our funding is and how those things are lining up.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what the immediate future looks like.
And will you build a studio in your basement?
So there will be no basement, which in our experience has been a good place to just acquire a lot of stuff. It is really nice to have a workshop there, so we will need sort of an outbuilding for the workshop. But yeah, it's going to be 24 by 24. So it's going to be with 2 rooms in the upstairs, a 12-pitch roof, and a masonry heater, kind of like that, in the center of the house. It'll be charming and intimate, and I look forward to having events there and having you telling stories in front of the fire there
I'd love to do that.
very soon.
All right. Well, thank you, Andy, for giving me your time tonight and sharing your copious skills and your beautiful word choices with our audience of now 9.
9, the few, the proud,
I
the
know.
excellent.
The ones on the
The
beaches.
taste of those 9 people is
Oh,
amazing.
somebody just came back. We're back up to 10. Anyway, Andy, thanks so much indeed for your time. I really appreciate it. It was great hanging out with you and just sharing stories and shooting the breeze. It was great. It was fabulous. Thank you.
It was an honor and a pleasure for me, Simon, and I look forward to getting together in different circumstances very soon with that guy Tony Toledo also.
Yes, the 3 of us. There's that music thing that you were talking about. Is that still
Yes,
happening?
November. But let's get
Let's
together
hope.
before November. There's Fiona saying hi, hiding behind
Hi,
the
Fiona.
Hello.
Hello. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming. Andy, you can stay around if you want for a little bit. Thanks for coming out tonight and joining us. It was wonderful to have you here with us. I hope you enjoyed the stories as well. Take care. Good night.